Today, on the first page of the Maamar, we're holding bottom of the page, second paragraph. We asked different questions about Vashem Berch Avraham Bakoil. What does it mean that Hashem benched Avraham Avinu with everything? It's referring to the idea of Hishlitoi B'Yitzrei. Reb Levi says this means that he made Avraham Avinu rule over his Yetzer. And he explains what the need for Avraham Avinu to be made to rule over his Yetzer. He already withstood the 10 tests and so on. What purpose is there for Hashem to have to help him with that? And we explained it's built on what it says beforehand. It says beforehand, Avraham Zokin Baba Yamim, and whatever the accomplishment was, Avraham Zokin Baba Yamim, building on that, in continuation of that, was the level of Vashem Berch Avraham Bakoil, as he will explain. Now, the Rebbe is going to have a bracket right in the middle, right in the beginning of the next paragraph, and he's also going to have a longer brackets on the other side of the page. And to be able to understand this bracket, it needs to be explained a little bit, even though some of this will be already explained in the brackets, what the Rebbe is talking about over here. We said the Rebbe said this Maamar from Tafshin Memdal in 1983 is based on a Maamar the Rebbe Rashab from Taf Reish Memdaled, 1883, of the same Divra Maskul and so on. Now, the Rebbe Rashab was known to write a lot of Maamorim in a way of Hemsheichim, continuing Maamorim, which means that there were a series of Maamorim, maybe it could be as few as 2 or 3, or there could be in the hundreds, like the Hemshech of Tafrish Ayin Beis, where the next Maamar in the series continues from the previous Maamar in the series. And in let's say in Ayin Beis, this went on over a series of few years actually, even though not every Maamar, every Shabbos was part of the series. So it's a Hemshech is a series of Maamorim continuing topics from one Maamar to the next, not necessarily at the beginning of the Hemshech, the middle of the Hemshech, and the end of the Hemshech, you could see the connection, but as you learn Maamar for Maamar going through the Hemshech, you're going to see that it's a continuation. One of the well-known Hemshechim is Tafresh Samach Vov of the Rebbe Rashab, but in Tafresh Memdalet, it was also part of a Hemshech of Maamorim. The way the Rebbe Rashab at least wrote the Hemshechim was that first he wrote the Hemshech of topics itself, then every week he connected one section of the Hemshech with the Torah, with the Parsha of the week, or whatever else he connected it, which means as follows. There was the body of the Maamar that was really part of the Hemshech. Then there was the introductory questions on the Parsha of the week, and then at the conclusion of the Maamar, there were the answers to the questions on the Parsha of the week that he tied in to the Hemshech. But really, these were add-ons later on. And there's evidence of this that the Rebbe is going to talk about, mention it later on the next brackets, that this was the way how the Rebbeim, or the Rebbe Rashab, for example, whose birthday is today, wrote his Hemshechim. First he wrote, First he wrote the entire Hemshech as a continuation, and then every week he chose out and he would deliver that part of the Hemshech, perhaps in public, with a connection to some topic on the Parsha of the week. So the Parsha of the week intro and the end of the Maamar was really not part of the Hemshech. So this is now what the Rebbe is going to refer to in the brackets over here and the next brackets. So the Rebbe Rashab asked these questions about Avraham Zochen Baba Yom Hashem Berch Avraham Bakoil. What's this idea that he made him rule over his Yetzer Hara? What's the meaning behind it? So he says, Umevair Bezeh Ba'Maimer. And the Rebbe Rashab in that Maamar of Tafresh Mem Daled explains about this topic. So now the Rebbe explains, what do I mean he explains about this in the Maamar? It's not in the body of the Maamar. Hainu B'siyum HaMaamar. Where does the Rebbe Rashab explain about what does it mean that Hashem Berch Avraham Bakoil Shishlita Beyitzroi, and why did he have to have that after all the Nisyonis Yirei went through? Why is it only at the end of the Maamar? Why am I not saying it's in the middle of the Maamar, literally in the middle of the Maamar? Ki Gufa Maamar, because the actual body of the Maamar, what he's calling, Hu Chelik Ma'Hemshach, it's part of the series. Hemshach LaMaamar Shalafonov, a continuation of the Maamar that preceded it. V'Hagdama LaMaamar Shalacharov, and it's an introduction or a preface to the next Maamar in the series of the Maamarim in that Hemshach. V'Rak B'Siyum HaMaamar, only when it comes to the end of the Maamar, Mitaretz HaKusha Shabas Chol HaMaamar, he answers the question at the beginning of the Maamar. As opposed to, for example, Maamarim that we see from the Rebbe. When we learn Maamarim of the Rebbe, we will see very often that the Rebbe, through the entire body of the Maamar, and we'll see it in this Maamar, for example, is really breaking down what he began at the introduction of the Maamar. What does it mean, Avraham Zochen Baba Yamim? What does it mean, Shishlita Beyitzroi? And he's working that through the entire Maamar. Whereas in the case of the Rebbe Rashab's Maamarim, especially where it's part of a Hemshech, it's only the introductory paragraph and concluding paragraph that will focus on those questions, and everything in the middle, even though it will be tied up with a bow at the end and connected to the questions and answers, but it's really not going to be focused on Vashem Berch Avraham Bakoil. So that's why the Rebbe says that when the Maamar, the Rebbe Rashab from Tafresh Mem Daled explains this, so the Rebbe says in the parentheses, in the brackets, parenthetically, you should know, I don't mean in the body itself, because the body itself is part of the series. I mean at the end of the Maamar. Okay, let's see, what does the Rebbe Rashab explain at the end of the Maamar? The Inyan HaNesoyin Hu, what is the idea of a challenge, of a test? Avraham Avinu, we said, withstood 10 tests. And still in all, after he withstood the 10 tests, still in all Hashem gave him the bracha to have him rule over his Yetzer Hara. So what's the idea of a test? Who hester upon him, it's a concealment of Hashem. Shenimshach me'olam ha'toyu. This concealment comes from the world of Toyu. The klippos, the concealments, Olam, Lashon Helam, all this came about because of the Shviras HaKelim that happened in the world of Toyu. The sparks came down, Klippa covered over. That's where the Nisyonis came from. Va'Avraham Shamet B'chol Nisyonis Avraham, that withstood all the tests. Hu shebirer as a Klippos Sitarachre Shemastirim al Oir Havayik Tushase. He refined those Klippos, the other side, that conceal on the light of Hashem and His holiness, because that's what a Nisayin is, a concealment. The Himshich, and he drew down that instead of there should be a concealment, that instead of a concealment should be just the opposite, should be a revelation of godliness down here below. So now, based on understanding this idea of what a Nisayin is, we'll be able to understand what the bracha was. That's the idea that Hashem benched Avraham Sheishlita Yitzroi. They made Avraham Avinu rule over his Yetzer Hara, meaning Shlo yitztarech li lochem oidem ha-Yetzer Hara. Top of the next page, v'sitrachre, that Avraham Avinu will not need to battle anymore the Yetzer Hara and the Sitrachre. Ki im yisbareru memela b'derech memnucha. Rather, the klippos and Sitrachre that need to be refined, they will be refined in an automatic way, in a way of rest. Chassidus explains there's different ways of birurim. One way of birurim is engaging with the thing, For example, it's the difference, let's say, between mitzvahs and Torah. In mitzvahs, I actually engage with the physical item, and I elevate it through my using it for Kedusha. A deeper, even more intense manner of engagement is that nisyonis, when I have to deal with my nefesh habahamis, my yetzer hara, trying to stop me from doing what I have to do, and instead I overcome my nefesh habahamis, and I deal with my nefesh habahamis, and I daven with my nefesh habahamis to make it realize the holiness of Hashem, etc., etc. That is engaging with the klipa, and it's a battle, and it's a war. Then there's a way of elevating, which is not in a way of war. By learning Torah, for example, when a person learns Torah and he comes to the conclusion, or he learns halacha, that this particular thing is prohibited, this particular thing is permitted, so he is mevarer, he chooses, he puts this on the good side of the board and that on the bad side of the board. So that's also a birur. And we had also in Tanya, and the Rebbe made reference to this in one of the Maamarim that we had recently, that when a person clarifies a halacha that was concealed, he makes an unbelievable thing in Shamayim because he's releasing that halacha that was concealed and covered over by Klippa. But all of that is not a direct engagement in Klippa. You're not dealing with the prohibited thing in actuality. It's all in a way of learning. So that causes the refinement in an automatic way, in a way of arrest, in a way where he doesn't have to engage with it, and that was the bracha. Instead of by the tests, where Avraham had to engage with the tests and fight with the yetzer hara, if you will. So over there was this type of, it was work, it was effort, it was a war. Whereas the bracha of Hashem, he shlita b'yitzra, he made him rule over his yetzer hara, means it wouldn't be a fight anymore. He would elevate the sparks, but like at a distance, the way one elevates through Torah study. So the Rebbe says in the second line on the second page, V'hainum sheba avoida da'oil matikun, in the avoida of the world of tikkun, which is our avoida, hamisakinas oil matoyu. The job of the world of tikkun is to fix up what happened through the breaking of the vessels, through the shviras hakelim of the world of toyu. That we said that now the sparks of olam hatoyu are trapped in klippas. So yesh bezeh beis shlovim. There are two stages in this engaging or this elevation and refining of what's went on in the world of toyu. Initially, it's the avoida only in a way of sublimating, subjugating the klippa, where the klippa is not yet in a way of being completely subservient. You're forcing klippa to follow your lead. You're vetoing anything it wants to do. And therefore, it's always a battle because Klippa is always coming ahead and Nefesh habahamis is always coming ahead and wanting to do other than what Hashem says. And you force yourself, you force the Klippa, you force the Nefesh habahamis to do what's right. That's a war. That's a battle. That's something that the person is engaging with the Klippa. And that's what every Nisayan is about. That's what every test is about, because the concealment of Hashem, there could be a possibility where the Nefesh habahamis is going to come and say, let's do this. And you have to force it and say, no. I veto that. We will do what Hashem wants. That is the first stage. Line 5, but following that, there's the avoida of transforming, literally turning over. That even the bad, and also the bad, is transformed to good. When the bad is transformed to good, there is no need to go to war anymore, because there is no bad to war and to battle. That's the idea that Hashem made Abraham control and rule over the yetzer hara, of transforming and turning over the bad to good. So therefore, that was the bracha, that even though he did all these wonderful things before, that he withstood 10 nisyonos, but he was still in a place where he had to battle the Yetzer Hara. Came Hashem and said, okay, I'm giving you a bracha now, no more war, no more battles. You can have an easy way of dealing with Yetzer Hara by having it transformed to good. And then the Rebbe goes on and says, V'yesh loymar, shezeu gam ken hakesher lamevur beguf hamaymer. This is, even though we explained this idea, because of what it says at the end of the Maamar, at the outro of the Maamar of the Rebbe Rashab, from which is not part of the Hemshech, but only added later on, still in all, the Rebbe is going to find a connection with the actual body of the Maamar, meaning that part that's part of the series that really doesn't have to do with the Parsha and Vashem Berch Avraham Bakoil. And he's going to say now in the brackets, what does he mean? What's the big deal about this? Vagam, he says in the brackets, Vagam shehemshech u'lechura inim b'fnei atzmai, though the body of the Maamar itself, which is part of the series, part of the Hemshech, is seemingly its own separate idea. V'aschola v'asiyum inim b'fnei atzmai, like we said, the introduction, the beginning of the Maamar, and the end of the Maamar is something different. How do I know? Maybe not. So the Rebbe says we could see it from actually the way how the Maamar was written when we look at the original manuscripts of the Rabbeim. Like we know in the manner that the Rabbeim, the Nesiim, wrote their Maamar. Initially, they wrote the entire series without the beginnings and the ends that connected to the individual parshas. The only exception to that is Chutz Ma'aschol Maamar Rishon, except for the introduction to the first Maamar. So let's say the Hemshech Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Tafresh Samach Vav, that he, as soon as he started the Hemshech, he began with the whole question about Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Tafresh Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah B'Mikdash Hayotaykim Avolay B'Medina, all of that. But then the following Maamarim were just the body of the Maamar without all the introductions and ends. And afterwards, during the time of actually when the Rebbeim said the Maamar in public, and or near before, in close proximity to the time when he said it in public, which could be even b'chadashim or b'shanim shalachar ksivus hahemshech. It could be months or years after the writing the series of the Maamarim. The Frierdiker Rebbe says about how Ayin Beis was something that the Rebbe Rashab was writing. I don't remember right now the years, but way before 1912, when the year Tafresh Ayin Beis took place, because the series, as a series, was something that was like in the works by the Rebbe Rashab a long time. So when it came in close proximity to when the Rebbe Rashab, for example, was going to say the individual sections of the series, so then the Rabbeim added the beginnings and the ends of the Maamarim to connect it to the particular parsha. You could actually see it in the actual manuscript that of the Rabbeim themselves, that you could see the way how it's written, that sometimes you'll have the original manuscript and then tacked onto it will be another separate paper, if you will, that has the beginning and the end of the different Maamarim, or sometimes the beginning and the end is like added on the side of the page of the Maamar. So you see that the series was written by itself. If you want to actually see this in a printed sefer, you could actually see it in the Hemshech of Tafresh Ayin Beis. In the Hemshech of Tafresh Ayin Beis, it actually has 3 distinct sections. If you look at the end of the Hemshech, I'm going to call it the last third, but I don't know if it's exactly a third or more or less. But the last third of the Hemshech is just pages and pages of Maamarim, not divided into paragraphs, not divided into simonim or oisius on the top showing, chapter this, chapter that, chapter the other. In the newer prints, they might have decided to divide it into paragraphs just for easy reading, but that's not the way it is in the older prints. Again, I'm not sure about the newer prints. Move back to the middle third. The middle third is already divided into chapters. It's divided into sections. And there is, section Kuf Yud Beis and Kuf Yud Gimel and Kuf Yud Dalet. But again, no intros and outros. If you go into the first third, again, I don't know if it's exactly a third, but I'm just saying because it's divided into three parts. There you will see Maamarim that have a beginning with a question on a pasuk. And you'll have a few chapters, and then you'll see a section at the end with the answer connecting it to the topic that speaks about in the Hemshech. Why this difference? The Rebbe Rashab initially wrote the entire Hemshech Ayin Beis as one series. Then he divided it into chapters, but it seems to be, from offhand what I'm aware of, again, I didn't do full research on it, that he then, without dividing into chapters, the next step was to divide it into chapters. He didn't finish, seems to be, dividing it into chapters. That's why we have a section that's totally without any chapters whatsoever. Then, as we said before, close to when the Rebbe Rashab would actually say the Maamar in public, at those times, the Rebbe Rashab added the introduction connecting to the pasuk and the outro explaining it. So that's why you have the first third, which is whatever amount the Rebbe Rashab had recited in public, had added those pieces. That is the section that has the beginnings and the ends. Therefore, seemingly, there is no reason to connect the explanation of Hashem Beirich Avraham Bakoil that we just now explained, which the Rebbe brought from the end of the Rebbe Rashab's Maamar from Tafresh Mem Daled, with the actual body of the Maamar, because they're really not connected. It's just at the end he wraps up in a bow, but it's really not connected. So the Rebbe says, still in all, line 18, B'chol zeh, despite that, moving it's understood. There is still an association and a connection between the beginning and the end of the Maamar, which was only, like we said, added later on to the actual content of the body of the Maamar. So now the Rebbe is going to say what in the body of the Maamar reflects and connects to this Vashem Beirich Avraham Bakoil that we just now explained. So back to the text of the Maamar after the brackets, end of line 19. Sheboy Mevayer, in the actual text of the Maamar of Tafresh Mem Daled, in the body of the Maamar itself, that in it he explains as Inyan Aliyas V'Hamshachas HaMalchus, the idea of the ascent and the drawing down of Malchus, Ukimavur Sham Baruch, like it's explained over there in that Maamar at length. The Kvar Nitpas Kanal was already printed, like we said before. Giselle Pirsum Ladoida is something that's printed, is something that's meant to be, like some Tzedek said, it's meant to be made well known for all generations. So over there it's explained the Inyan Amlias HaMalchus, the idea of the ascent of Malchus. Bebchinas Acher Ba'acher, the ascent is back to back. So that means that the union of Malchus with Zeir Anpin is an external union. He dugmas ha'avoida de iskafia, it's similar to the avoida of subjugating klippa. Just like when I'm doing something, forcing myself, that means that inside I'm not really with the program. It's just externally I'm doing it. This corresponds to what in that Maamar talks about, that the ascent of Malchus is an ascent of back-to-back of an external type of ascent. The Inyan Amshachas HaMalchus, the idea of the drawing down of Malchus, upon him in a way of face-to-face, which means there's an internal connection, not just externally I'm doing. Dugmas ha'avoida de'ishapcha is similar to the avoida of where I transformed my nefesh habahamis, where I transformed the bad, so then I'm not forcing myself to do it. I'm not doing it just externally with my external part, but it's an internal commitment. So that's what he connects the 10 nisyonis for Hashem Be'ech Avram B'Koil with what that Maamar speaks about, an ocher ba'ocher type of union versus a panim b'panim type of union.